Apple pie. Yum. Toll House pie. Yum, yum. Key lime pie. 10 yums for me, at least. Enemy pie. Enemy pie? Have you heard of it? It doesn't sound very yummy, does it? According to the children's book, Enemy Pie, by Derek Munro, enemy pie is sure to get rid of your enemies, though. The narrator, a little boy who has no name, has one arch enemy, Jeremy Ross. Now, Jeremy Ross is the only person that is named in the book. The little boy's dad has the recipe for enemy pie. He learned about it as a kid himself. And he tells his son that he is very willing to make it. The little boy, though, thinks that enemy pie should be filled with things like weeds, earthworms, rocks, and your gum when you're done chewing it. Yuck. But he thinks this because this is a pie that surely would make your enemy miserable and maybe cause them great harm. But that's not the case. Enemy pie looks and smells like our favorites, with one singular addition. You eat it only after spending the day with your enemy and being as nice as you possibly can to them. As you may guess, as an outsider thinking about the book or remembering it from childhood, something happens during the day of fun and play. The enemy gets turned into a friend. By the time the little boy, the narrator, and Derek get to dinner, the little boy doesn't want Derek to eat the enemy pie. Dad, don't give it to him. I don't want his hair to fall out. I don't want something terrible to happen to him. But they all eat the pie together because enemy pie takes care of your enemies by making them a friend. This children's story that's been around for a while makes me think of what Martin Luther King Jr. said. Love is the only force capable of making your enemies your friends. Or maybe the only force as a kid is learning to play and have fun together. Then you can stop seeing someone as your enemy. You probably know that in all the world's religions, we hear the same rule. Love one another as you have been loved. Treat one another as you want to be treated. Make enemy pie with others. We call this the golden rule. Jesus mentions it in today's gospel. It's right at the end of the first paragraph. With such consistency across the world's religions, you would think that everyone on earth would agree to this rule and be ready to make enemy pie all over the place each and every day. But we don't. Just look at last week's headlines on a world scale or even close up in our community. You can tell that everyone is not living out the golden rule. And I predict that in this coming week, we'll see the same thing. This is where Jesus comes in. He has come to help us with this. As you look at today's gospel reading, you'll notice that Jesus is pointing us toward agape. Agape love. Love your enemies, he says. And when he says that, he's not talking about a feeling that we have for a friend. In Greek, that's philia, love. He's not talking about the love feeling that we have for our family members, our closest relatives. In Greek, that's another word, storge. He's not talking about the love that we have for our sweetheart or the love that we have when we are on Valentine's Day and can't get enough chocolate. That's eros. He's talking about agape, an active love that wills, that seeks the best for another, even when we don't like them, even when we don't feel good about that person. Agape is an act of will. You probably know, having come to church, that agape is best reflected in selfless service. And of course, as Christians, we see agape most clearly in Jesus' life. He perfected it. Love your enemies, therefore, Jesus might have said, just like I love you. Now notice the active, willful commands that Jesus tells his disciples. Be good to those who hate you. Ask God to bless those who curse you. Pray, an act of will, for those who are cruel to you. Be kind, an act of will to others who treat you badly. Give, an act of will, expecting nothing in return. Then Jesus goes on to say, in doing this, you're God's children. In doing this, you'll be rewarded. Perhaps we can pick up from last week. In doing this, you will know blessing. Go ahead, Jesus says. Be like your Father in heaven. Be merciful. Be forgiving. Give. And don't judge. Jesus' words on agape bring making enemy pie or loving others into our relationship with God. He makes this a part of the beautiful work that God is already doing in our lives. God is agapeing us, and now we are called to do this beautiful work of God in the lives of others. In fact, I would say that loving others is the central, primary work that you and I are to do as Jesus followers. Agape is the centerpiece of our lives as Christians. Now, why do I say that? Because this is what Jesus came to do. He came to change us from being his enemies to being his friends. We set ourselves away from God, and Jesus came to bring us into friendship with God. Now, this is what we are to do for others, to help make that same journey from not just being our enemies and friends, but from being God's friends as well. It is agape working in our hearts that gives us the power to be children of God, to be those beloved children that we talked about way at the beginning of Epiphany. It's that agape each and every day in our lives that helps us to make enemy pie and be a part of bringing others into a loving relationship with God. And some days it is an act of will, simply based on the love that we have in God. If you've read the book Enemy Pie, you'll know at the very end of the story, the narrator, the little boy, he put his enemy list up in his treehouse. Number 1 enemy, written really big in his treehouse, Jeremy Ross. Imagine how he must have felt when Jeremy Ross wanted to come up into that treehouse on that day when they were making enemy pie. The little boy thought to himself, I can't let Jeremy see that. He's not my enemy anymore. He's my friend. I've got to get that sign down. I can't let him see that. And so the little boy ran up and tore down his enemy list so that Jeremy wouldn't see it. Who do you need to agape so that you may run ahead and take them off your enemy list? Who do you need to agape this week, today? Who do you need to share kindness with, generosity with, forgiveness, mercy? Who do you need to stop judging? Who do you need to make enemy pie with? I invite you, I encourage you to go ahead and get to work on this. Don't put it aside. Don't think it's just going to go away. But go ahead and get to work on making enemy pie, on agapeing those who you consider separated from you as your enemies. I say this because Lent is fast approaching, and it is going to give us 5 whole weeks to hear exactly how far our Father in heaven will go to make us friends and not enemies. You and I have a lot of friend making enemy pie to do. We are to do exactly what our Father in heaven has done for us because we are his children. It is now our job to share the beautiful work of what Christ is all about. If we go ahead and get a good start on it right now, we'll be all the more ready for it in Lent. And when Easter comes, and that good news, the fullness of what Christ has done, is realized in our lives. Amen.